For centuries, we have been told that civilization was born in Mesopotamia, in Greece, or along the Nile. But hidden in the heart of Africa, our story's history chose to forget. Lost empires, powerful kingdoms, and civilizations that shaped humanity, only to be buried beneath sand, stone, and silence. Their memory is faint, their ruins scattered, but their legacy whispers still. This is the journey into Africa's lost and mysterious civilizations, the kingdom's history forgot. The Sahara is often imagined as a vast, lifeless desert. But thousands of years ago, it was alive with rivers, fertile valleys, and trade routes stretching for thousands of miles. Caravans carried salt, gold, ivory, and even ideas across its dunes. Beneath those shifting sands lie the traces of forgotten empires, cities swallowed by time, stone walls broken by wind, and histories erased by silence. For too long, Africa's past was dismissed as a blank page. Colonial writers labeled the continent dark, claiming it had no history worth remembering. Yet every ruin tells another story. Archaeologists uncover fragments, pottery shards, iron tools, and inscriptions that reveal thriving cultures, vast networks of trade, and kingdoms as sophisticated as any in Europe or Asia. These civilizations were not isolated. They built ships that sailed across seas, forged iron centuries before many others, and erected monuments that still stand as silent witnesses. Their people developed traditions, languages, and knowledge that shaped entire regions of the world. The sands of the Sahara may have buried their monuments, but they could not erase their legacy. Africa's lost civilizations are not myths. They're missing chapters in humanity's shared story. And at last, their voices are beginning to rise again. When most people think of pyramids, they imagine Egypt. Yet farther south, along the Nile, another kingdom thrived for centuries, the kingdom of Kush. From its capital at Meroe, Kush rivaled Egypt in wealth, culture, and power. Its kings wore crowns of gold, its queens commanded armies, and its artisans built temples that still stand today. The Kushites were not simply imitators of Egypt. They had their own gods, their own language, and their own artistic style. Their pyramids, smaller but far more numerous, rise from the desert sands of Sudan like a forest of stone. Each one marks the tomb of a ruler whose name once carried weight across nations. At times, Kush conquered Egypt itself. In the 8th century BCE, Kushite pharaohs marched north and established the 25th dynasty. Under their reign, temples were restored, traditions revived, and the Nile Valley flourished once more. This was not the shadow of Egypt. It was Africa reclaiming its own destiny. Yet history often reduces Kush to a footnote. In truth, it was an empire of innovation and resilience. Its people mastered ironworking, built thriving trade networks, and influenced the course of ancient politics. Today, the pyramids of Meroe still stand against the desert winds, silent but enduring witnesses to a forgotten age of power. High in the Ethiopian highlands rose the kingdom of Aksum, one of the most powerful empires of the ancient world. From the 1st to the 7th century CE, Aksum commanded trade routes that linked Africa to Rome, India, and Arabia. Its merchants dealt in ivory, gold, incense, and precious stones, while its coins, stamped with the names of kings, traveled across continents. What set Aksum apart were its monumental obelisks, towering granite steely carved with breathtaking precision. Some stood over 100 feet tall, etched with patterns that resembled multi-story palaces. They were not just markers of graves, but symbols of authority, reminders of rulers whose names demanded respect. Aksum was also one of the earliest great powers to embrace Christianity. In the 4th century CE, King Ezana declared it the state religion, long before much of Europe had converted. From here, Christianity spread across East Africa, leaving a legacy still alive today. Yet Aksum's influence went far beyond faith. Its ports buzzed with international trade. Roman ships carried Aksumite goods, and travelers from India recorded its wealth. The empire stood as a bridge between continents, connecting worlds through commerce and culture. But like many great powers, Aksum declined. Climate change, shifting trade routes, or invasions may have played a role. Still, the obelisks endure, piercing the Ethiopian sky, whispering of an empire that once stood at the crossroads of civilization. On the northern coast of Africa, in modern-day Tunisia, rose a city that terrified Rome itself, Carthage. Founded by Phoenician settlers around 800 BCE, Carthage became a naval and trading superpower. Its harbors brimmed with ships, its markets overflowed with goods from across the Mediterranean and beyond. The Carthaginians were master sailors and merchants. They established colonies across North Africa, Spain, and even as far as the Atlantic coast. Their wealth rivaled any kingdom of their time. But Carthage was not only about trade, it was about power. Its generals commanded massive armies, including mercenaries from Africa and beyond. The most famous of them all was Hannibal Barca. In the 3rd century BCE, he marched his war elephants across the Alps and nearly destroyed Rome itself. For years, he outmaneuvered the greatest Roman generals, proving that Carthage was more than just a trading hub. It was a force of destiny. Yet history is written by the victors. Rome eventually crushed Carthage in the Punic Wars, burning the city to the ground in 146 BCE. Roman writers painted Carthage as cruel and barbaric, a civilization deserving of destruction. But the truth is more complex. Carthage was an African superpower, a city of innovation, wealth, and daring. Though its walls were toppled, its memory still echoes in history as proof that Africa shaped the Mediterranean world as much as Rome or Greece ever did. In southern Africa lies the mysterious site of Great Zimbabwe, a city of stone built between the 11th and 15th centuries. Its massive walls, some over 30 feet high, were constructed without mortar, yet still stand centuries later. This was no village. It was the capital of a powerful kingdom that controlled trade routes stretching to the Indian Ocean. The name Zimbabwe itself means house of stone, and the ruins reflect the sophistication of its builders. Within its walls were royal palaces, ceremonial centers, and bustling markets. From here, rulers controlled the flow of gold, ivory, and cattle, wealth that reached merchants in Arabia, India, and even China. When Europeans first encountered Great Zimbabwe, they refused to believe Africans had built it. Myths were created, crediting foreigners like the Phoenicians or Arabs. But archaeology proved the truth. This was an African achievement, born of local genius and skill. Great Zimbabwe was not just a city, but the heart of a vast kingdom. Its influence extended across southern Africa, its wealth tied to global trade. Yet by the 15th century, it was abandoned, perhaps due to shifting trade or environmental decline. What remains are the towering stone walls, silent and unyielding, reminders of civilization that defied the stereotypes of Africa as primitive. Great Zimbabwe stands as a testament to African power, creativity, and resilience. Few names in African history shine as brightly as Mali. At its height in the 13th and 14th centuries, the Mali Empire controlled vast territories across West Africa, from the gold mines of Bambuk to the trade hubs of Timbuktu and Gao. Its rulers commanded armies, scholars, and unimaginable wealth. The most famous of all was Mansa Musa. In 1324, he set out on a pilgrimage to Mecca with thousands of followers and camels laden with gold. His generosity was so great that in Cairo, he reportedly caused the value of gold to collapse for years. This single journey made Mali legendary across Europe, Arabia, and beyond. But Mali was not only about riches. It was a center of knowledge. Timbuktu, with its libraries and universities, became one of the intellectual capitals of the medieval world. Scholars gathered to study astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and law. Manuscripts from that era survive, proof that Africa was not silent, but thinking, questioning, and teaching. Trade caravans connected Mali to North Africa and the wider world. Salt, gold, and ivory flowed north, while knowledge and culture spread across the desert. Mali's story challenges the false image of Africa as poor or backward. It was a land of riches and wisdom. Though the empire eventually fragmented, its legacy lives on in stories of golden cities and kings who redefined what wealth and power could mean. As Mali declined, another giant rose in West Africa, the Songhai Empire. Centered along the Niger River, Songhai became the largest empire in African history, stretching across modern Mali, Niger, and Nigeria. By the 15th century, it had eclipsed Mali in both size and power. Its capital, Gao, was a thriving city of trade and culture. Caravans carried salt, gold, and slaves across the Sahara, while scholars and poets enriched its courts. Timbuktu, absorbed into Songhai, continued to flourish as a center of learning, home to thousands of manuscripts and some of the finest scholars of the age. The Songhai were skilled administrators. They divided their empire into provinces, each ruled by governors loyal to the king. Their military, strengthened by cavalry and river fleets, ensured that trade routes remained safe and wealth continued to flow. One of its greatest rulers was Askia Muhammad, who expanded the empire, reformed laws, and encouraged scholarship. Under his reign, Songhai reached its cultural and political peak. But greatness invites envy. In 1591, Moroccan forces armed with guns invaded. Though smaller in number, their weapons crushed Songhai's cavalry. The empire collapsed, its glory reduced to memory. Still, the manuscripts, traditions, and stories of Songhai endure. They remind us that West Africa was not merely a land of tribes, but of empires, organized, powerful, and deeply connected to the global stage. In the forests of West Africa, the Kingdom of Benin rose around the 11th century. Centered in what is now Nigeria, Benin became famous for its artistry, governance, and monumental achievements. Its capital, Benin City, astonished early European visitors. It was surrounded by massive earthworks, walls and moats stretching for thousands of miles, one of the largest man-made structures on Earth. Within the city stood wide streets, palaces, and markets bustling with activity. But Benin's true genius lay in its art. The Benin bronzes, intricate plaques, and sculptures cast in brass and bronze remain among the finest works of African craftsmanship. They depicted kings, warriors, and everyday life with astonishing detail, preserving the history of the kingdom in metal. Benin was ruled by the Oba, a sacred king whose authority was both political and spiritual. Under his leadership, Benin controlled trade routes, dealt in ivory, pepper, and slaves, and developed a complex system of governance. European traders were amazed by Benin's sophistication. But in 1897, British forces invaded, looting thousands of bronzes and burning the city. Many of those treasures now sit in European museums, a haunting reminder of what was stolen. Yet the legacy of Benin survives in its art, its memory, and the resilience of its people. The kingdom proves that Africa was not merely surviving before colonization, but thriving with creativity and innovation. Along the eastern coast of Africa, from Somalia to Mozambique, flourished the Swahili city-states. From the 10th to the 16th centuries, these cities, Kilwa, Mombasa, Zanzibar, became hubs of global trade, linking Africa to Arabia, India, and even China. The Swahili people were skilled sailors and merchants. They built ships called dhows, their triangular sails catching the monsoon winds that carried them across the Indian Ocean. They traded gold, ivory, and slaves for silk, spices, and porcelain. Archaeological finds of Chinese ceramics and Persian glass prove just how global their connections were. Their cities were built of coral stone, with grand mosques, palaces, and markets. Kilwa, at its height, was described by travelers as one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It controlled trade routes as far south as Sofala in Mozambique, channeling African gold into the hands of Arab and Asian merchants. The Swahili culture was a blend of African and Arab influences. Their language, Swahili, reflects this mix, a Bantu tongue enriched with Arabic words, still spoken by millions today. But the arrival of the Portuguese in the 16th century disrupted their dominance. Cities were bombarded, trade routes seized, and the golden age of the Swahili coast declined. Even so, the coral ruins of Kilwa and the vibrant culture of Swahili-speaking peoples stand as proof of Africa's deep role in the world's oceans of trade. From the pyramids of Kush to the manuscripts of Timbuktu, from the obelisks of Aksum to the bronzes of Benin, Africa's civilizations shaped the world in ways history books rarely admit. These kingdoms traded across oceans, built monuments rivaling any in Europe, and produced wealth and knowledge that astonished travelers for centuries. Yet much of this history was silenced, buried beneath colonial narratives that claimed Africa was empty and primitive. In truth, Africa was never isolated, never voiceless. It was central to human progress. Today, archaeologists, historians, and local communities are rediscovering this legacy. Ancient manuscripts are being preserved, ruins studied, and oral traditions recorded. Each discovery rewrites the story of humanity, reminding us that Africa was not on the margins of history, but at its very heart. The tragedy is that so much was lost, cities burned, treasures stolen, knowledge erased. But the triumph is that Africa's story endures. Its stones still stand. Its art still inspires. Its people still carry the memory of greatness. This is not just Africa's history. It is our shared history. The story of lost kingdoms and forgotten empires reminds us that the past is bigger, richer, and more complex than we were taught. And if we listen closely, the voices of Africa's ancient kings and queens still whisper through time, calling us to remember.